You are listening to Move Forward with Matt Campisi. Move Forward is an interesting mix of motivational, political, and comedic discussions designed to empower, inspire, and entertain. Host Matt Campisi is a political candidate and social advocate. Episodes feature special guests and occasional artistic performances. And now here is your host, Matt Campisi.
720,000 people die by suicide every year globally. Suicide is the third leading cause of death among 15 to 29-year-olds worldwide. Suicide is the 11th leading cause of death in the United States, accounting for over 49,400 deaths in 2022. Suicide rates are significantly higher among males than females, 4 times higher in the United States in 2022. They call this the gender paradox in suicide. People with mental health conditions, a history of trauma or abuse, and substance use are at an increased risk for suicide. Firearms are the most common method of suicide in the United States. Those are just some facts I wanted to highlight as we begin the next episode of Move Forward with Matt Campisi, where we're talking about suicide. I appreciate you listening to the podcast. We are going to have a special guest, someone who specializes in suicide prevention education. We're going to have a talk with him and get his perspective, his point of view on suicide. We're also going to tackle the very controversial topic of a person's right to die. What does that mean? We're going to talk about that on Move Forward with Matt Campisi, suicide. I got first introduced to this issue by watching a documentary back in 2011. 2011, they did a documentary. It was on HBO, and it was called How to Die in Oregon. And the documentary basically talked about Oregon's Death with Dignity Act, which legalized physician-assisted death for terminally ill patients. And the documentary, which I highly, highly recommend, if you get a chance, watch this documentary. It may change your whole outlook on this issue. But what the documentary does is it takes you through actual case studies. It takes you through actual terminally ill people's lives that are dealing with this horrible cancer, with this horrible issue of I am in pain and I want to control, my own life here. It's a very, very heart-wrenching documentary. And anyway, that's what got me interested in this topic. And it got me thinking, if I was in that situation, if I had, stage 4 cancer, I was really, really suffering in a lot of pain, would I want physician-assisted suicide? And how would the legality, of course, how would that legality affect me where I was living if I wasn't allowed to do that? Would I have to travel to Oregon or travel to some other state to do it? Or how does it all work? So it got me thinking about that. And it's a very, very fascinating topic and very, very controversial. And I completely got to acknowledge that people feel very, very strongly on both sides. There's the people who feel that, it's their body and they have a right to do that, especially if they're terminal and they're in a lot of pain and there's no hope for a cure. Then there's other people who feel very strongly that life is precious and no doctor should be prescribing any type of medication that kills somebody. They're supposed to take the Hippocratic oath that says you will do no harm. And here they're doing exactly that. They're doing harm. So I get it. It's a very, very controversial topic, and it's heated. There's a lot of politicians who don't want to touch this topic with a 10-foot pole. There's some that have very strong opinions against it, and some with very strong opinions in favor of it. I think, to really, really appreciate this topic, you really got to personalize it. You really got to put yourself in these patients' shoes. You really got to put your mom, your dad, your sister, your brother, your child. You've got to really, really let it hit close to home, because that's where this effing matters. Okay? That's where it's going to matter to you. Put yourself in those shoes. You've got stage 4 cancer. The doctors have done everything possible. They have done experimental treatments. They've done every treatment available. And the consensus is you are going to die. There's nothing more they can do. The cancer, it has overrun your body. You're in a lot of pain. Do you have a right to check out and say, I've had enough. I want to take control over my own life, autonomy? I want to go to the right to die. It's called the right to die concept. I want to go to the right to die Wikipedia page, and you can follow along with me if you'd like. The right to die is a concept rooted in the belief that individuals have the autonomy to make fundamental decisions about their own lives, including the choice to end them or undergo voluntary euthanasia, central to the broader notion of health freedom. The right is often associated with cases involving terminal illnesses or incurable pain, where assisted suicide provides an option for individuals to exercise control over their own suffering and dignity. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see it talks about some of the arguments in favor and some of the arguments against. Some of the arguments in favor: if one had a right to live, then certainly one must also have the right to die, both on their own terms. Death is a natural process of life, thus there should not be any laws to prevent it if the patient seeks to end it. What we do at the end of our lives should not be of any concern to others. After all, it's our life. If euthanasia is strictly controlled, we can avoid entering a slippery slope and prevent patients from seeking alternative methods which may not be legal. Some of the arguments against this right to die concept: it can lead to a slippery slope. If we allow patients this right, it can expand and have dire consequences for society. It could give rise to pressuring those to end their lives or the lives of others. That could be ethically immoral by human and medical standards. Is it throwing away patients who are deemed no longer capable to be a part of society? It could lead to a decrease in palliative end-of-life care due to the expectation of terminal patients to exercise their right to die. So what do you think about this, guys? This is a tough one, right? Do people have a right to die under certain circumstances? And, particularly we're talking about terminal cancer, a terminal illness where they're going to die. It's a tough one. Let me know what you think. Visit my website, MatthewCampisi.com. It's MatthewCampisi.com. Click on the contact link, send me an email, tell me what you think about this topic. So I want to mention this issue before we get into the general suicide prevention discussion with our special guest, because the question is suicide ever justified? Is there ever a good reason to commit suicide? And that is a very, very tough topic. It's almost like it offends when we hear it to our ears that a reason to kill yourself. It seems crazy, right? It seems mentally ill. But I encourage you to watch this documentary, and I encourage you to really put yourself in the shoes of the patients and really, really consider the right to die argument before making up your mind on that one. But we're talking about something specific to a person that has a terminal illness, a person that is going to die. They're going to die. So very controversial, very, very controversial topic. I am definitely interested in your input on that. There's no easy answers when it comes to this. I acknowledge that there are some very, very valid, very, very strong arguments on both sides. The people who are against this make some very, very compelling arguments about the sanctity of life, about never giving up. Maybe a cure is just around the corner, and to give up, But then you got to put yourself in that patient's shoes, that patient that's in a lot of pain is ready. I do support the safeguards that they have in place for it. You have to go see a psychiatrist. You've got to got to have second opinions. This is a bureaucratic process. You don't get prescribed these medications, willy nilly. They put the patient through a process to make sure that the patient is of sound mind to be making this kind of decision. And we certainly don't want patients that could be potentially change their mind, because there's no going back once you ingest the medication. So we got to make sure that this is really what they want. So very, very interesting topic. I may address this again in another podcast, where I may devote the entire podcast to this issue. But I wanted to kind of give you some food for thought as we go into our topic of talking about suicide. Is that central question is it ever okay to take your own life? I am not a proponent of taking your life. Don't get this twisted. This is life. And life, we all know, life is not always black and white. There is usually lots and lots of shades of gray in the world that we live in. And all I'm doing is pointing that out in this podcast. So please don't take this the wrong way. I'm not advocating for people to take their own lives. What I'm doing is I'm suggesting that this is a very complex topic that is not black and white. I want to welcome to the podcast Frank King. Frank is a suicide prevention speaker. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for talking to me today. We're going to be talking about suicide, so it's a pretty heavy topic. We have a few questions to ask you. The first question is, why did you get involved in speaking about suicide?
Oh, well, that's easy. There are more nuts in my family than in a squirrel turd. Actually, on a serious note, depression and suicide run in my family. It's called generational depression and suicide. My grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. My great aunt died by suicide. My mother and I found her. I was 4 years old. I screamed for days. And in 2010, following a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, I learned what the barrel of my gun tasted like. Literally. Spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger. It's okay to laugh. That was the point. A friend of mine came up after a keynote once. He'd never heard me say I didn't pull the trigger. And he was kidding around. He goes, "Hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger?" I said, "Hey, man, could you try to sound slightly less disappointed?" And I have two mental illnesses: major depressive disorder, relatively common, and chronic suicidal ideation, which is rare. It means for me and people in my tribe, suicide's always an option on the menu as a solution for problems large and small. And when I say small, car broke down a couple of years ago. I had three thoughts. One, get it fixed. Two, buy new. And three, I could just kill myself. That's chronic suicidal ideation. So I had always wanted to make a living and a difference using my comedy. I just could never figure out how. And a friend of mine wrote a book called The Message of You, Turn Your Life into a Money-Making Speaking Career. She gave me a copy and said, "Frank, read this, you'll figure it out." And I went into it thinking I got nothing. And then about halfway through, I thought, oh my God, given my family history, my near suicide, my mental illnesses, I could keynote on suicide prevention if I got some training, which I have. Second thought was, wait a minute, you've been doing comedy for 2.5 decades. Who's going to take you serious about anything? So I thought I'll do a TEDx talk. So I applied, got the first one I ever applied for, rare. And then 2 more events called and said, "Do you have any more mental health topics?" Oh, yeah. So I just did my 13th TEDx, and each one has some sort of mental health element to it.
Wow.
So that's how I got into speaking on. I've been doing stand-up comedy full-time for 39 years. But in 2014, I began speaking, public speaking.
Wow. That's awesome, man. So what kinds of things do you tell people about suicide, and what's your message to folks?
Roughly every year, 8 million people seriously contemplate suicide in the U.S., 1.4 million attempt, and when I started in 2014 with my first TEDx, 39,000 died by suicide. Sadly, last year it was just over 50,000, so it's getting worse. And so I said the good news is 8 out of 10 people who are suicidal are ambivalent. 9 out of 10 give hints in the last week leading up to an attempt, which means you can make a difference. You can save a life, and you can do it by doing something as simple as you and I are doing right here. and that is having a conversation if you know how. And I tell the audience, before you leave, you will know how. So I teach them the signs and symptoms of depression and thoughts of suicide, what to say and do, what not to say, what not to do, and how to find resources. And then my takeaway, my action item is I encourage them to create a self-care plan. I think everybody, whether you're depressed or not, should have a self-care plan because, sometimes the world melts down like in COVID, and it'd be nice to have something you do every day. I have a very simple one. 5 things: diet, exercise, good night's sleep, meditation, medication. I tell the audience, look, the through line there is, those are all things I can control. The rest of it, just got to let go. I can't do anything else about politics, about climate change, so I think you should have one non-negotiable in that list of 5 or so, and mine is working out. If I don't do anything else that day, I work out.
That's awesome, man. I've got a tough question for you. I just wanted to get your thoughts on. Do you think there is ever a rational justification for suicide?
In the mind of the person who is contemplating suicide, yes. People often say, didn't the person think about the people they were going to leave behind? When in fact, yes. One of the 3 legs of the 3-legged stool of suicidality is burdensomeness. They feel like they're a burden to their family, their friends, the world. They think everybody would be better off without them. So it's a selfless act, irrational, but selfless from the inside looking out. From the outside looking in, seems very selfish. So yeah, in their mind, in my mind, I was going to kill myself because we'd filed bankruptcy. We'd lost everything. My wife was devastated. I had $1 million life insurance policy. I thought, I can fix this. I was going to kill myself for the money. She'd be brokenhearted, but she wouldn't be broke anymore. So I felt like I was a burden because, if I off myself, she would be restored financially. So yeah, so people think when you're suicidal that your entire, brain is, the wiring is wrong, but there was still a rational part of my brain thinking, okay, so I called my insurance agent because I knew pretty much every policy has a 2-year suicide clause. If you kill yourself in less than 2 years, nothing gets paid. Over 2 years, full payment. So I called my insurance agent. I didn't want to leave her broke and brokenhearted. So he said, you've had it 22 months and don't do it. Because he gotten calls like that in the past where policy was in force, he delivered a check. So yeah, my rational mind was still functioning. I was not going to do it until I was sure. So I had to wait 2 months to kill myself.
Wow. So if we had a listener out there and they were thinking about taking their life, what would you say to them?
I would say that I would ask them to call 988, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, or text. If they're younger, text 988. If they text, it'll be somebody roughly their age on the other end to text back. What I tell people is, look, I'm not going to ask you not to kill yourself. What I am going to ask you to do is please call, text 988 before you do, because I would make it a personal favor to me. I would feel horrible if I knew I was the last voice you heard before you did it. So, and I would say, go get an evaluation. Find out what it is you have. Is it garden variety depression? Is it the depressive state of bipolar? Schizoaffective disorder? What is it? And have a physical. Sometimes physical ailments manifest as mental health problems. So get a full workup, and make sure it's not something organic going on that's causing, this to happen in your brain.
Frank, thank you so much for talking with us today. Where can our listeners get more information about you and your speaking engagements and what's going on with you?
Well, I'm in witness protection, so it's pretty much out of the question. Actually, I have a website, mentalhealthcomedian.com, mentalhealthcomedian.com. And, I also have what I believe is my best 25 minutes of stand-up ever on video on a YouTube show series called Dry Bar Comedy. So if you type Dry Bar Comedy into YouTube, into the search bar, and put Frank King, you'll find my 25-minute special. So if you need a laugh, I think you will be glad you, and it's, I don't know if you're familiar with Dry Bar, but it is a super clean. Yeah, there's Club Clean, Corporate Clean, and Provo, Utah Clean comedy. And so the kids can sit right there. They're not going to learn anything they don't already know.
That's awesome, man. Frank, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I know you're a busy guy. I appreciate you taking time to talk to me and getting a little insight on suicide. Thank you so much, man.
Can I close it out as a comedian would?
Absolutely.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe, and tell your friends. If you did not enjoy this podcast, well, we hope you have no friends.